So, as you'll already know, this time last week, Johnson's Conservative Party won a resounding majority in the UK general election. So now it's time for the new government to get to work and start setting their agenda. We already know a good amount about Johnson's plans, as he's been Prime Minister for a few months. He held a Queen's speech in October, and he set out his party's policies in their manifesto. But now, as Prime Minister once again, Johnson gets to set out his stall and explain to the British people what he wants to get done. Before we discuss Johnson's plans for 2020, we wanted to let you know that we have some big plans for 2022. We'll be announcing them soon, but to make them possible, we'll need your support. I'm sure you know about our Patreon, our pin badges, shirts and PayPal, so I won't bore you with that again. But if you want to support us and our future, then there's links to all of those things down below. And if you're interested in how TLDR is funded, you can also find an article about that linked below. You might remember our video about 2 months ago, where we discussed Johnson's first Queen's speech, where he laid out his government's agenda. Within weeks, he dissolved that government in order to hold a general election. And now we're back with Johnson's new government, as well as a new chance to put their plans forward. For those unfamiliar with the theatricalities of the British parliamentary system, the state opening of Parliament is the event which marks the beginning of each parliamentary session, and the Queen's speech is only one element of the ceremony. The ceremony begins with the yeomen of the guard searching the cellars underneath the Palace of Westminster to ensure that there's not a repeat of the 1605 gunpowder plot. You won't be surprised to hear that this is more of a symbolic move, as smuggling gunpowder into the palace is a fair bit harder in the 21st century. Then members of both houses enter their respective chambers, and the Commons begins its normal business. Then the Lord Chamberlain takes one MP hostage, to ensure that the Queen is allowed to enter the Parliament unharmed. Once the hostage is taken, the Queen arrives in the House of Lords. Then the Usher of the Black Rod proceeds to the House of Commons to invite MPs to join the Lords in the House of Lords. When Black Rod reaches the doors to the House of Commons, they're slammed in her face to symbolise the Commons' independence from the monarch, in a move harking back to 1642, when King Charles I entered the Commons to try and arrest 5 MPs. Unfortunately, there weren't cameras in Parliament 380 years ago, but trust me when I say that no monarch has been allowed to enter the House of Commons during a sitting since then. Black Rod doesn't give up though, and strikes the door with the ceremonial staff, the Black Rod where she gets her name from. And after striking, the doors eventually open. Black Rod then gets to make their statement to the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, the Queen commands this Honourable House to attend Her Majesty to the House of Peers immediately.
The members then proceed to the House of Lords, often including some excruciating small talk between the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition. So with all that theatricality over, the Queen then reads the aforementioned speech, which has been written by the government. The speech highlights what the government has planned for the year ahead. The Queen herself makes no comment on the proposals, and reads the whole speech in a neutral tone, to prevent anyone from reading approval or disapproval into her tone. So let's have a listen to what the Queen said, and what Johnson's plans are for the coming year.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government's priority is to deliver the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of January. My ministers will bring forward legislation to ensure the United Kingdom's exit on that date, and to make the most of the opportunities that this brings for all the people of the United Kingdom.
So, hands up, who's surprised that the party of Get Brexit Done starts the Queen's speech with Brexit? To be fair though, the Conservatives do seem focused on getting Brexit done, whether or not you like the type of Brexit that they're gunning for. Later today, they plan to bring Johnson's deal in front of the House of Commons, hoping that this time round, with a significant majority, they can convince MPs to finally sign off on the Brexit deal. Then the Queen continued with how Johnson's government planned to progress post-Brexit.
Thereafter, my ministers will seek a future relationship with the European Union based on a free trade agreement that benefits the whole of the United Kingdom. They will also begin trade negotiations with other leading global economies. The integrity and prosperity of the United Kingdom is of the utmost importance to my government. My government will embark on an ambitious programme of domestic reform that delivers on the people's priorities. For the first time, the National Health Service's multi-year funding settlement, agreed earlier this year, will be enshrined in law.
It's also unsurprising that Johnson's government are looking to concentrate on the NHS. While they say that they'll enshrine their commitments to the NHS in law, that commitment was the smallest of the major parties at the election. However, it's still going to be reassuring to many that the Conservatives are committed to spending on the NHS.
Steps will be taken to grow and support the National Health Services workforce, and a new visa will ensure qualified doctors, nurses and health professionals have fast-track entry to the United Kingdom.
Visas and immigration are a core issue to the UK at the moment, especially when it comes to the National Health Service. Research from Parliament itself found that around 153,000 NHS employees weren't from the UK, with about 10% of doctors coming from EU nations. If the UK wants to protect its NHS, immigration will be an important issue.
A modern, fair, points-based immigration system will welcome skilled workers from across the world to contribute to the United Kingdom's economy, communities and public services.
While the Queen didn't use the exact phrase, she touches on the idea of an Australian-style points-based immigration system, something which was emphasised a lot by the Tories during the election campaign. And if you want to know more about this strategy, there's a link to a full video on the topic down below.
My government will bring forward measures to support working families, raising the national insurance threshold and increasing the national living wage. My government will take steps to support home ownership, including by making homes available at a discount for local first-time buyers. My government is committed to a fair justice system that keeps people safe. My ministers will establish a royal commission to review and improve the efficiency and effectiveness. New sentencing laws will ensure the most serious violent offenders, including terrorists, serve longer in custody.
This section of the speech obviously reflects the terrorist attack which took place on London Bridge a few weeks ago. The Conservatives have consistently emphasised how tough they want to be on crime, and this is manifest throughout the speech.
My government will ensure those charged with knife possession face swift justice, and that the courts work better for all those who engage with them. Legislation will be brought forward to support victims of crime and their families. My ministers will bring forward measures to ensure that every part of the United Kingdom can prosper. My government will prioritise investment in infrastructure and world-leading science research and skills in order to unleash productivity and improve daily life for communities across the country.
Protecting the Union is important for Conservatives, unsurprising considering their full title is the Conservative and Unionist Party. During this section, they seek to emphasise the investment they plan to make across the whole Union, in order to win favour with the less happy Scots and Northern Irish.
My government will continue to take steps to meet the world-leading target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050.
The Conservatives do indeed have an objective to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050, and while they're proud of the target, many experts believe that their current plans run counter to this objective, making it difficult, if not impossible, to achieve. Not only do they seem unwilling to implement policies to make this plan a reality, it was also the least ambitious net zero target of all of the major parties. It is of course noteworthy that all UK parties are putting such a focus on environmental issues, especially compared to some other nations. But many experts issue that in many ways the UK is greenwashing rather than achieving the objectives.
It will continue to lead the way in tackling global climate change. A bill will enshrine in law environmental principles and legally binding targets, including for air quality. A Constitution, Democracy and Rights Commission will be established. Work will be taken forward to repeal the Fixed Term Parliaments Act.
You might remember that the Fixed Term Parliaments Act was the bane of the Conservatives' lives earlier this year, when the opposition refused to permit their election. Scrapping the Act, which has only been in place since 2011, will allow the party more control when it comes to calling elections in the future.
My government will continue to invest in our gallant armed forces. My government will honour the Armed Forces Covenant, which will be further incorporated into law, and the NATO commitment to spend at least 2% of national income on defence.
The armed forces is of course an important issue in UK politics, and in this current phase, it's important to rediscover the UK's place in the world.
An integrated security, defence and foreign policy review will be undertaken to reassess the nation's place in the world, covering all aspects from defence to diplomacy and development. My ministers will promote the United Kingdom's interests, including freedom of speech, human rights and the rule of law. Members of the House of Commons, estimates for the public services will be laid before you. I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your councils.
So those were the Queen's remarks in the House of Lords. Little of the speech was surprising, sticking to the Conservatives' core policy promises. If you want to know more about the Conservatives' policies, then check out the video we made on their full manifesto. We'll be keeping them to account on their manifesto during 2020 and beyond, checking that they keep to their promises. But we'll have more on that in the weeks to come. If you do want updates on how the new Conservative government plays out, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you want to be notified every time we release a video, tap the bell icon too. And finally, if you want to see your name at the end of the videos just like these people, then sign up to our Patreon. There's a link to that down below.